Today we'll be talking about emotional flooding and how to end a conversation without triggering the other person. This can be quite tricky to do. I know a lot of you get stuck feeling like you can't continue in the conversation because it's just too much, and you can't end the conversation because then the other person is resentful or triggered or upset with you. If that's what you're struggling with, or you're encountering somebody who's struggling with that, then this one is for you. If we haven't met before, I'm Shaneé with Evolve Relational Therapy. I help clients with relationships, so if you need help, please reach out. Step one is to identify the early signs that you have become emotionally flooded. Emotional flooding tends to refer to this state where your heartbeat is above 100 beats per minute. You tend to notice things like feeling really hot, your fight or flight response is activated, you're on high alert, adrenaline is really coursing through your veins. There are all these changes occurring within your body. You tend to have more difficulty talking to somebody else, really being able to hear and understand somebody else because you are heightened and looking for the threat. And when you're in that state, you tend to find a threat. So take a second here when you start to feel flooded, when you start to notice that something's changed in your body, slow things down a bit, get really good and clear on what that signal is. Notice your heart rate. How fast is it? Are you feeling hot? What other sort of signs tell you that you're flooded? Do you notice your breathing maybe changes? You're breathing a little bit more quickly, or you're holding your breath? What sort of thoughts do you have? Do you tend to think about how right you are and how wrong the other person is, and you really hold on to that in your mind? The more aware you are of your own body and what's happening within you, the better you'll be able to put a halt to communication before it goes really bad, and the better you'll be able to explain this to your partner. If you don't know what's going on within you, how are you expecting somebody else to be able to pick up on that? Step two is to indicate that a break is needed. Once you've noticed that you are emotionally flooded, you're no longer going to be able to have that productive conversation with the other person, and you need to set a break or take a break from the conversation before returning. And the first step in doing this is to verbally say that a break is needed. It can be really helpful if you give additional explanation to the other person you're talking with. It can help them understand why. So for example, you might say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now, or I'm feeling emotionally flooded right now. I don't know what's going on. I need to take a break. Something along those lines, finding whatever works best for you. Step three is to set a time, the length of time that you're going to take before returning to the conversation. Typically, I recommend people using 30 minutes as a minimum. That's what Dr. John Gottman tends to also recommend, and he does a lot of research on relationships and physiology. This often looks like you saying, can we set the timer for 30 minutes and then come back to the conversation? Or I've got this meeting coming up for the next hour. Can we come back to the conversation at 7 o'clock? Would that be all right? It's preferable if the two of you can agree on it, but other times the conversation might just be too heightened for that to happen, and you might just have to indicate that I'm going to take a break for 30 minutes and I'm going to come back to the conversation if you're willing to then continue. This step is really important because it gives the other person a sense of predictability. They don't have to wonder if or when you're coming back to the conversation. You both know, and it's really clear to each of you. Also, you don't want to spend more than 24 hours away or have a break longer than 24 hours. You have to imagine that the other person is probably going to struggle most during this period of time, managing themselves whilst there's still a present threat to the relationship, which is also threatening possibly to their sense of safety or security. So that can be really hard for them to manage, just like it's hard for you to manage maybe a certain level of emotional intensity or a certain level of disagreement within a conversation to be able to stay present and calm. Step 4 is practice self-care. Now that you've implemented the break, go and do something that brings you a sense of joy or a sense of relaxation or feeling calm. Consider things like reading a book, going for a walk or doing something outside, playing with a pet, listening to music, doing something creative or crafty, anything that really works for you. You don't want to spend this time ruminating about how right you are and how wrong the other person is. If you're worried you might forget something really important, then maybe just jot it down and keep it in a confidential location. But really practice just being present, finding something calming and relaxing. Obviously, this information is not for you if you're in an abusive relationship. And if that's the case, consider how you might protect yourself, how you might need to reach out for help, and what that looks like. Step 5 is return to the conversation. Before you return to the conversation, you do want to make sure that you are physiologically calm, that you're able to go about things in a productive manner. So, as with the first step, start to identify what that looks like for you. What does calm feel like? How do you notice your breath or your heart rate? What kind of thoughts do you typically have? What sort of things are you typically doing or wondering about? All of those things are going to help you over time get a clearer sense of when you're calm and ready to re-engage. Now, going back to the conversation of anything we really talked about here is the most important thing. Over time, it does make you more predictable. It really sends signals of, I'm trustworthy, you are safe with me, I care about your needs, and I'm gonna come back. This is hugely, hugely important. So remember to come back to the conversation. And if I were you and I'm the person setting the break, I'm probably going to come back to the conversation a minute or two early just to prevent the situation occurring where the other person has waited exactly 30 minutes and they're standing there saying, hey, it's been exactly 30 minutes and you didn't come back to the conversation. You want to try and curtail any sense of failure. You really, if you set the break, you need to be the person to come back to the conversation first, to re-engage the other person. If by chance you're actually not feeling calm, that this has been really difficult for you to really relax and calm down during this time, still return to the other person and maybe just say, I'm still feeling really overwhelmed or emotionally flooded and I need another 20, 30 minutes, however long you need to continue practicing your self-care and work on calming yourself. And then repeat the steps as we've discussed them. Before you go back into the conversation, you want to consider your partner's perspective or the other person's perspective, what they might be experiencing or going through, and then decide on at least one way that you can go about the conversation in a more productive manner. Understanding when you've become emotionally flooded and then taking a break can be a really useful tool. However, I strongly recommend you to find a therapist or somebody who can help you tailor this to your specific needs and circumstances and discuss that with you. If you and your partner or the other person is not used to taking breaks, then it's really useful to have somebody explain that to them or to even help walk them through this process, maybe show them this video so that they can know when you're setting a break, like you're trying something new and that they can work on self-regulation. Give them the opportunity to be able to respond in the way that they need to respond rather than just surprising them and expecting them to be able to do something more productive. It's going to be really difficult for that to happen. Also, you want to make sure you don't overuse breaks or timeouts. If it's regular that any amount of emotional tension triggers a break, then maybe there's something there more significant that you should discuss. Again, find a therapist, do what you need to do to care for yourself and your relationship. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for you. Until next time, bye. There is probably some sort of representative, of course it's going to be hard for you to express your deep emotional intentions and thoughts and feelings because they're just not going to be accessible. How many times have you tried to end a conversation and then never come back to it? Now that you've implemented